Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Open Banking Expo DigiFest. Delighted to be hosting the Fireside Chat now with Ed from Bud. My name's Julian Wells. I'm director at Whitecap Consulting and FinTech North. Ed, a very warm welcome to you. Great to have you with us today, and obviously really appropriate to have Bud involved in an open banking event, given everything that you guys have been involved in and achieved over recent years. And perhaps to kick things off, you could just set the scene and give us a bit of background about Bud and the story so far.
Sure, absolutely. Well, look, thanks for having me. So I guess Bud, we were founded back in 2015 with the idea that customers at the time, and me as a user, I was between 2 different countries. I had multiple different bank accounts, different third-party fintechs using to move money between. And the challenge, that we kind of saw was actually, as there was an emergent sort of trend of new financial products, new things coming to the market, there was not really anything that was kind of being done to help customers really understand what those products and services were, understand their finances from a broader perspective, and kind of make better financial decisions. And so back in 2015, we decided we would launch an app, which was a B2C app. We started building the service. We looked at a couple of different providers in the market. There was a few providers that was doing screen scraping to fetch the account information, because this is prior to open banking. But what we found was actually the services out there, the way they didn't encrypt data, the way they did, their security practices, we weren't really very happy with. And so for that reason, we decided to build our own systems so customers can connect accounts. And as we did that, as we first launched that first application that was around financial management and well-being, and recommending like really relevant tailored products that might help the customer, we launched that in the FCA Sandbox, in the first ever FCA Sandbox, which was very helpful because it was kind of a new, innovative way to introduce services. We started to get attention from banks for lots of different reasons. The first actually being the fact that we were scraping them, and they noticed our IPs coming through, and they were trying to block us, and then create ephemeral IPs, and we did all this sort of funky stuff. In the end, we actually started kind of collaborating with the banks. So they said, "Look, you're going to scrape us. Actually, why don't we whitelist your IPs? This kind of stuff. We know, you've got good security practices." And so that was the first kind of conversations we had with the banks. After that, then, as open banking rolled around and people started to sort of think about, okay, how are they going to react to this? How is this potentially an opportunity for customers? They started to talk to us about some of our data services, some of the enrichment tools. And that really kind of brings us, actually, that's really been our journey to today is, we changed in 2016 from being a consumer brand to a business organization. We picked up investment from a handful of sort of large banks, and we kind of continue to work with them. And more recently, we've started working a lot more with non-banks, sort of fintech technology companies, consumer brands, to really start to kind of help their customers to get a better feel for their finances, try and make those experiences a little better using open banking. So that's a sort of brief history of us and what we've been up to.
Yeah, that's great. And you've covered loads of ground. So obviously the Sandbox has helped you. Looking at your website, getting ready for today, the list of investors that you've got now is phenomenal, really. So you've scaled up as open banking's kind of become a thing and evolved. Am I right in saying that your early roots were outside London as well? I know you're London based now, but is that correct?
I have a very mixed accent. I was born just outside London, but my mum's from Hull, my dad's from Scotland, so grew up a little bit in Surrey, and then moved to the States. Lived in Atlanta till I was 12, and then moved back to Harrogate in North Yorkshire, and that's kind of where I kind of went to school and kind of grew up there, and until I was sort of in 19. So yes, I spent a lot of time going around Yorkshire, cutting grass,
Yeah.
doing all sorts of odd jobs around Yorkshire. Absolutely.
So was Bud founded in Harrogate, or was it founded in London?
Actually, it was, if you think technically, it was the idea. Actually, I came up with it when I was over in Dublin working at Salesforce. But when I moved back, I left my job at Salesforce. So I moved back to Harrogate, which is the sort of family house. I had a little office in an industrial estate there. My other co-founder is a friend from Harrogate as well. But sort of prior to being in Dublin, I lived in London. So my friends were in London, and my co-founder lived in London. So it kind of became a sort of natural route to move down to London and actually sleep on his sofa during the kind of initial phase. But yeah, there was certainly a good few months where we were based up in Harrogate. So yeah.
Great. Because we had you came and you guys spoke at a FinTech North event in partnership with First Direct, because they were obviously the big kind of high profile case study in the early days, and you were fast out of the blocks with them, weren't you, when the open banking rules came into play?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we made a good few trips up there. It was quite nice to, because they're based just in Leeds, and that's very much kind of where I spent a lot of my time growing up. So and kind of got to know them quite well. And yeah, certainly it was a great kind of early proof of concept. We went into I think it was the third sandbox, FCA sandbox, with them to test again what we'd been doing, but with that first ever sort of bank and fintech collaboration in the open banking world. In fact, it was quite an interesting test because when we started it, we were still screen scraping, and we actually, during that customer test with about 5,000 First Direct customers, we actually flipped over to the open banking models. Not without hiccup at the time, but yeah, it was certainly interesting to see the way that customers sort of started to change that behavior.
Yeah, it was Arthur, wasn't it? That was the name.
That was it, Arthur. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. So kind of bringing us back to today and the sort of the evolution of open finance. I just wonder what your thoughts are in the direction of travel, in terms of what are the sectors it's going to move into, and have things changed, or how have things changed through the pandemic in 2020?
Yeah, I mean, look, we have this kind of theory on open banking. It talks to kind of our strategy, really, is that there's like we've seen it, modern open banking, there's kind of three major steps, or three major waves to get to kind of real customer adoption and scale. The first is the kind of the first phase is really around the connectivity, the security, and the reliance, and that connectivity being cost effective for third parties to use, and that's really been what most of the work has been around for the first couple of years of open banking. And there's been a lot of press coverage sort of saying we're 2 years in, and what has it done, and what's the scale. And I think understanding that actually really that first 2 years, because it's a mammoth job that the OBIE had, the banks had to do, and also kind of the testing process that's taken that time. And so I think in the beginning of this year we were kind of still in phase one, but actually as the pandemic rolled around, we actually accelerated into phase two much quicker. And that was really our theory was always that phase two was the place where we were building towards, and that is really around, once you have that kind of underlying connectivity, you can then start focusing on key use cases of taking the data and having enriched understanding what's in the data, understanding third parties and banks, understanding their customers more holistically, beyond just kind of, let's bring the data in. Great, you've got the data, but what are you going to do with it? So, that's kind of created an opportunity and a problem at the same time, as there's more data than ever. And the opportunity is if you can then, build systems or partner with people who have systems that help to kind of really understand the customer from that level. The third wave is really around the kind of more seamless interaction and porting of data to lots of third-party sort of services. There are some examples of that through marketplace services today. But as we go into open finance, I think that's when this portability of data becomes more kind of it just starts to affect more industries adjacently, and those industries are able to work together in one customer experience, because it's the customer's data that's allowing that kind of seamless sort of movement between multiple kind of back-end services or companies in one experience. So we think really the pandemic certainly accelerated us into that phase two. Certainly where we've seen a lot of activity, a lot more people coming to us to have conversations about data services, data intelligence beyond just the open banking connectivity. We actually started something we were planning to do, but again we had to accelerate, was actually to allow customers to build to pass us open banking data from other aggregators or their own aggregation, for us then to enrich and create services on top of that. And that's been, again, a huge growth area for us this year.
Okay. Can you give any clues into what kind of sectors you're referring to there, where things might be going next?
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously the retail space, because of this year, it's most of the pieces looking at e-commerce, but there's some great partners we're working in that are looking to transform the retail experience. There's a great opportunity because you're lowering the cost of payment, that retailers can offer their customers kind of better rewards and loyalty and experience there. They can, because also you're paying with and you're authenticating with your bank account, there's a higher degree or a lesser risk of fraud, and understanding that that customer has control over that account, not just they've picked up that person's contact list. So the opportunities that you can, the experiences you can offer people kind of move forward, and then there's wider implications for businesses and how they look to service customers, how they understand their customers. So really, I mean, this is just I think we're really at the beginning of this wave of understanding. That we really believe that the financial data set that any one customer has is the most important single one data set that exists. In that it's predictive it can be predictive of the customer's future. It can tell a story of someone's past, and there's lots of great ways that that data can be unlocked to help people. Of course, we have to ensure, GDPR gives us a great framework, that it's being used for the right purposes, that it's done securely. So, like I say, there's, when we go into sort of the non-financial sector, there's, other things we need to start to think about a little bit more as well.
I can certainly seen a lot of activity in the retail sector this year with loyalty and rewards. So I'm not surprised to hear you say that. Yeah. You've referred quite a few times since we started talking to security and the need to be secure. What are obviously the data's moving in lots of new places, and that's only going to continue by the sounds of things. What do you think are the main risks, and what could be done to mitigate them and give people confidence in this field?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of talks to one of the way we set up as a company is actually, right from day one, we were very security conscious. We were thinking about, encryption, and we set ourselves a really difficult problem that has caused us lots of issues going forward. But it's really, it's a foundational principle of ours, is when we encrypt in a way that the data is only decrypted when the customer is present, and we can never access a customer's data directly. We build our data services in a way that it enriches customers' data anonymously, right? And the reason why that's important is because when we go forward, as we're going forward to things like open data and these things, it is important for customers to know that if they're sharing their data between organizations, and those organizations are using their data in an agreed upon way, that actually there is a huge amount of risk involved with that, right? You're trusting organizations to hold very important data, but actually, if those organizations are holding that data in an anonymized fashion, that really mitigates most of that risk. So that data is never, you're never able to figure out based on a data set that data set belongs to that person. So that mitigates a lot of those risks, and I think that's quite important. And it also allows, with our security models, allows us to engage with organizations that wouldn't necessarily be involved in the open banking world, because, hey, look, they don't want to start holding financial data, they don't want to start doing these things, but they certainly want to know more about their customers and be able to service them better. So can they anonymously ask questions, and we can sort of return enriched results without passing over all of that data? And equally, in our systems, we can't attribute a data set to an individual. I don't know if that makes sense, but it certainly is kind of one of the core principles. And we believe that's something that we don't see that's happening across the industry, but we think is really important to focus on it. And it talks to the reason why we, again, have partnered with large enterprises, and it really talks to why we are able to get through, the due diligence process and actually be trusted by these large entities to be doing this kind of very, very important work.
Sure. So if I understood that correctly, so you're talking about encrypting the data so that it's not able to be compromised, but at the same time it can be identified at either end.
It can't be compromised. Yeah, it can't be compromised. The mitigation is that it's non-identifiable to an individual, and also all of our enrichments are run at real time. So only when the customer is present, when they've logged in and they've decrypted their own data, they hold their own key to decrypt the data. We can never decrypt a customer's data in the background.
Okay.
They can only decrypt it when they come in and view it. And so we're not sitting in the back looking through, everyone's seen The Social Dilemma. We're not looking through and seeing how someone's using, how they're spending and saying this person's doing that. What if we did this? It's not like that. It's about building systems that are able to identify patterns in data, but not say this customer is doing X.
Okay, cool. Right. Well, you've given us some good insight there into how things are going to develop. As open data sort of takes hold and develops and becomes more and more commonplace, what are the who stands to be the big winners in the ecosystem? Really, who's best placed to make the most of open data?
Yeah, I mean, I actually, one of our beliefs is that, one of the things that we really care about is, we think that if people have better finances, that they can make better financial decisions, they can do the things that they want to do. And I think that's really, and not to be cliched about it, but I actually think customers are the biggest winners in this. The conversation has completely changed in that, because now in a world of open banking, realistically, any financially regulated organization with a customer's permission can pull the customer's data, and that means that the customer can choose to go to any experience to interact with their finances, to view them, to make those decisions. So actually, the real competition that we see out there through fintechs, through banks, and is actually, how do we make better experiences more compelling, more helpful? How do we give more value back to the customer? And in that, we hope to win loyalty from the customer. We hope to win the trust from those customers. So I think, the competition is really around how well can we serve customers, right? And that can only benefit individuals. And I think we're seeing that. I think we're seeing that like the types of conversations that we were having in 2016 with organizations, where they were going, okay, so you can do what, and why would we do that? And now we've got, the same organizations or similar organizations coming back to us and saying these things about, introducing third-party services that aren't their own, that are beneficial to the customer, being able to, offer these services. So I think the conversation's flipped, and that's what's exciting. In terms of like the providers of open banking and different services, I think there'll be plenty of winners. It's a very big ecosystem. It's a very noisy ecosystem as well, as I'm sure we all agree to.
Mm-hmm.
But there's always going to be sort of, I think, specific winners in different places. For us, what we really care about is building really compelling data tools that actually help customers make those key financial and life decisions. How we think about winning is really think about, how are we helping customers? Are we helping them to do the right things? Are we giving them the clarity, the visibility, and ultimately the peace of mind that open banking should promise? That's the way we measure success. I think there's a lot of, like I say, there's a lot of competition. There's a lot of focus on what one company is doing to another. But I think, we're very, very heads down, and we're very focused on, the services we think are exciting. And that's why we spend a lot of time in research and development. We have our own applications that we test through, so we can hopefully get ahead of, when a fintech comes to us and says, hey, we're thinking about implementing some financial tools. What do you think? What have you seen? What works? What doesn't work? Mm-hmm. We don't want to be in the business of selling products that aren't going to be successful. That doesn't do anyone favors.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of fintechs have gone down the route of trying to integrate with as many banks as they can. And would it be fair to say your proposition seems to be geared a lot more around insight? And looking at your website, it comes across that way as well. What's the angle there?
Our thinking is this, and is, like I say, we're thinking about customers on a kind of individual perspective. So, there's a huge amount of accounts out there that you can aggregate. But really, we want to think about use cases. So, what is the use case to you or I of connecting 1,000 different products? I don't think either of us, I hope neither of us have, 1,000 different financial products. The real kind of power is being able to sort of say, real simple things actually that aren't so simple. One of the things we're currently working on is, this whole challenge around credit card statement dates. You've got this sort of seemingly sort of difficult thing to understand, and where you get paid on one day, you're spending on your credit card. At some point, the balance then isn't the balance; it's then a billing date, and that changes over. And then you don't know if you're spending, if that's going into that bill as a customer, or it's going into the next bill. And do you have the sufficient cash to pay this bill given what you think it is today, even though it's actually not the balance you see today, because the payment from the card hasn't come out yet. So there's a statement somewhere else. So there's just these things that we're really focused on, and they require data tools. They require doing things like solving internal transfers and doing a lot of like kind of deep work, understanding how someone over the course of 12 months is trending, and looking at those key points like, okay, what was your balance the day before you got paid last month? What was it the month before? What was the month before that? And those kind of trend points, as you plot those together, start to tell you a really interesting story about someone, and start to help you identify great ways to intervene and help people. So we've recently launched this product called Signal, which is all about being able to actually, it goes through, it's a really remarkable tool. You feed it a set of data and it will pop up, hey, we see that this individual is, their balances across the accounts that we can see are trending down by 12% month on month the last 5 months. Is this someone that's in distress? Should we intervene? Can we surface a notification? that will say, hey, by the way, we've just seen this happening, you know, either, you know, control your spend, or here's some ways, you know, utility switching, or some ways to reduce your costs if that's something that's happening. So these are the things we're really focused on, and the things we think really matter. If, you know, a customer or comes to us and says, yeah, I really like these tools, but I need, you know, this account and this account and this account, these are really important to me, then we can be targeted and we can have those accounts. But we're very kind of use case driven in that, and very kind of focused on the customer and the client relationship.
Sure, makes sense. Makes good sense. Thanks. In terms of open banking and the sentiment towards open banking, there's a view held by quite a few people that it really is set up to help people who've got disposable income. What would you say to that? How do you feel open banking is helping vulnerable customers as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know where that view comes from. I mean, I guess I understand that there are lots of organizations that are building tools for people with lots of disposable income. But I mean, like, this is a foundational technology that, you know, the ability to pull through account information, analyze it, give insights back to the customer, help customers onboard to third-party services more easily through open banking, you know, be able to find like relevant products and services. Right. So, you know, the work we've done on rental recognition, helping people with thin credit files who are paying out rent every month, and they aren't, you know, none of that is being seen as making them more credit worthy, which is kind of ridiculous because it's a huge outgoing. Sometimes it's more than the mortgage. And I know people out there will say, well, actually, you know, with a mortgage, you have to account for variances and risk and add those things in, which is true. But really, these things should make sense. And that's not really about helping someone with more disposable income or less. You know, I think, you know, 50% of people in the UK are still overpaying on their bills. The loyalty penalty is a huge issue. I think, you know, there's a lot of work, you know, we're doing and others are doing around debt management. I think there's certainly a huge opportunity for people with lots of accounts and lots of money to be up to optimize their finances, for sure. But equally, people with less money that are struggling, I think that kind of help, hand up, that insight is more important for them. So, I mean, I guess maybe people are judging like the work that's been done in the last 2 years as kind of the sum of the parts, but I don't think that's necessarily the case.
Yeah, yeah, and I guess over the next year we're probably going to see a lot of focus in the FS industry on the people that have got problems. You know, there's been quite a range of experiences from individuals going through 2020, and money management is going to be a real kind of core competence for a lot of people moving forward.
We've spoken to some great charities that are looking to do some great work, and especially about, you know, now in relation to families that are being impacted by the pandemic, and how, you know, if their income changes, you know, like that, you know, what are their fixed incomes? How can they make sure that they know what is the essential and non-essential, and how can then charities, these certain charities that are looking to help to intervene. So, you know, there's all this work. Obviously, we can't talk about specific stuff, but I mean, you know, there's some really great work being done there.
Sure. So some work with charities, but what else is on the horizon for Bud? What's next? What's the next couple of years hold for you?
I think it's always nice when people ask that question to give some sort of like kind of incredulous answer around, you know, the future of flying cars or something like that. But I mean, honestly, I think the work is still very much to be done around really understanding customers deeply, and understanding these things, these sort of nuances of their finances, and being able to kind of make their data actionable and find key interventions for people. You know, for us, we want to create more intelligent services, more interventions that help optimize and improve people's lives. You know, things that take away the huge amount of anxiety that we have in this nation around, and in most nations around around our finances. And I think, the exciting thing about open banking is, as we're getting into this phase 2 part, that's what it's really about. It's actually not just about data science. It's actually about the merging of behavioral science and data science. And that's something that I think we're only really starting to unpick. I think as an industry and as an organization, we've been very focused on data science and cleaning up the data and making it usable. We focused on security for a number of years, but now it's starting to add that behavioral science in. There's, of course, there's foundational stuff that we do from a behavioral perspective around, the nudging and all this stuff, but we can get deeper into that. And I don't think that really, like, our eyes need to be taken off the ball for a number of years on that. That's a huge problem and a huge challenge, because everyone not only has different finances, but everyone, as we're finding out through the data, through do a lot of customer interviews, that everyone kind of treats their finances differently. And some person talked the other day talking about how they see one of the shops they use online as almost like a bank, because they buy stuff off it's a clothes shop, and then they have a kind of a set of returns that they have, right? And they keep clothes, and they know they've got 30 days to return those clothes, and they say, oh, that's basically money in the bank. So there's all these kind of crazy nuances that people have in the way they use their finances that, like, we're really just starting to unpick. So I don't think that journey will change for a long time.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, there's a lot more tools available to people, aren't there? And things like just stuff like rounding, I think, has become part of people's money habits as well.
Absolutely. Great tools.
What we're just about out of time now, but one last point to ask you about the banks. We often talk about the banks when we talk about open banking for obvious reasons, but they haven't really, for all the collaboration in the industry, they've not collaborated too much. It's mainly been through third parties. Do you see more bank-to-bank collaboration coming through moving forward?
Sort of banks working with one another.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, as this industry sort of evolves, we're certainly seeing that banks that we speak to wanting to play specific roles in people's lives, not trying to be all things to all people. There is certainly specific ways that some investment bank or some investment product might be integrated into another one. I mean, back in Arthur back in 2016, we had multiple bank products in a bank app. Like all these things, that experience is inevitable. There will be multiple banking products in a bank app, whether it is through a bank or it's through a third-party service. There's going to have to be a degree of collaboration, because I believe truly that if something is a better customer experience, it inevitably will happen. So we certainly hope we'll be involved in partnering and making some of that stuff happen. But as far as I'm aware, it's certainly an inevitability.
Yeah, it'd be an interesting one to keep an eye on, I guess. Like you say, with Arthur and the open APIs, then you can view the bank data, but you can't necessarily do too much more.
Yeah, more will be opened up. More functionality will be opened up.
Yeah, great. Well, look, we've come to the close now. So just want to thank you very much for joining us today. Not sure the visuals are quite as good as they could be on the call, but the audio has come through loud and clear, and I think that the insights that you've shared and the story that you've shared for the viewers is really fascinating and very interesting to listen to. So thank you, and best of luck with everything at Bud.
Thank you so much.
Hello, everybody.
Well, hi everybody.
Welcome back
We're back live
to
now.
Banking Expo DigiFest.
Welcome back to
Delighted
DigiFest.
to be
Ed
hosting
and I
the
are
Fireside Chat now with Ed
both
from
on. Ed,
Bud.
good to see you again.
My name's Julian Wells. I'm Director at
And
Whitecap Consulting in FinTech
I know there's
North.
been quite a few of you listening.
Ed, very warm welcome to you. Great to have you with us today, and obviously really appropriate to have Bud involved in an open banking event, given everything that you guys have been involved in and achieved over recent years. And perhaps to kick things off, you could just set the scene and give us a bit of.
So Ed, a couple of questions here that I'm going to group together, which are kind of follow-ons from the conversation we were having. First one: now that you've accelerated to phase 2, which use cases are you exploring? And related to that, when do you expect the industry to move towards phase 3 with seamless movement of data? What do you foresee as the main challenges on this journey?
Sure. Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. So phase 2, like I say, it's around use of data. Primarily sort of use cases that we see in terms of, the kind of most effective uses of those data. The first sort of wave of that is, faster onboarding, taking, understanding someone's income, understanding all these things, either for an affordability assessment or for like quick onboarding, which can also be done with an affordability assessment, like for a financial product or a loan. The sort of second part of that is kind of the adding additional context to data, so like understanding trends. So something we just recently launched was a product called Signal, which really is around looking through data and finding either significant events or trends, whether those things are happening, and then whether people are their balances are decreasing month on month, or they've just had a windfall that's different to their normal income, or there's these events. So first of all, notifying customers of either events that we've seen, trends that we've seen, and then being able to give them actions off the back of it, which takes us onto that kind of phase 3 piece, which is sort of phase 2 is really around understanding the data and the customer from that perspective. And that's very much like, the analogy I use sometimes for this is like Google search versus Google ads, right? The third phase is actually how does a customer find something useful, but then there's monetization off the back of it. The first phase is organizing data in terms of the search function and being able to understand, what customers are looking for, what's useful to them. When they've got once you've built kind of search in terms of financial data, then you can kind of have these really nice sort of trade-offs. Okay, we've seen that your balances are increasing over time. You maybe should start thinking about saving some money, looking at lifetime ISAs or ISAs or whatever the relevant products for that individual is based off of income and all the different things we find. Then introducing that client, and that's when that marketplace journey happens. We've done a lot of work in marketplace, but the idea of marketplace in the future is, rather than sort of a kind of less intelligent dumb marketplace that we see today, which is really just a bunch of ads. It's sort of really tailored, the kind of going forward to that really tailored approach to saying, we find something, this is why we think it's relevant based off of your data, this is the thing that we've seen, and here is the product. And it's just that third bit is actually very difficult just to get that all right. But we need to sort of accomplish this phase 2 first. So that's kind of how I see those paths going. But as we know, and as I'm sure many people know in the industry, that phase 3 is coming. Like the way we see it is it's this sort of seamlessly integrated, deeply intelligent piece, and then managing the consent of that information and data sharing as well. Is an important piece. So that piece is coming. Not many people are thinking about that proposition quite yet, about helping customers understand the flow of their data beyond the sort of regulatory requirement. I think that's quite an interesting use case as open banking is used in more experiences.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, there's reflecting back on the pre-recorded conversation we had, there was a clear, you had a journey to becoming more data and insight focused, and can see how that's flowing through to a more intelligence orientated proposition moving forward. There's a question about your product pipeline as well. Has the pandemic changed your product pipeline? And if so, what has this looked like?
Yeah, so again, a lot more customers were coming to us saying, you know, and this is the whole thing that we talk about into the phase 2, was actually saying, you know, we've got data, or we're using an aggregator, or we're doing it ourselves. Well, however, you know, we really want to start using this data in earnest to understand customers today, because with everyone changing spending behavior, you know, almost overnight, a lot of people's income changing, and going forward, you know, this morning, the average income is expected to decrease in the next 12 months by £1,200 or household income. And these things have big effects, right? Because actually a lot of people aren't dealing with huge amounts of disposable income. So how do we then understand our customers that we thought we knew, but we don't know anymore? They've changed. And how do we, so that's really in terms of actually getting an understanding from the data. But how do we continue to do this as customers evolve throughout, you know, the next 12 to 24 months? And that was a two-part thing. That was, we started to put more emphasis on signal. We actually launched it sooner than we thought we would. We started to put more insights and more sort of services, you know, new types of insights, new types of trends. We've also started to look at the customer from a much broader perspective in terms of timelines. You know, there's a lot of insights that are focused on what's happening this month, but actually we're trying to get the context of annual costs, annual planning, budgeting, those kind of things, and how those things will affect, you know, future products. And then the third piece is we also accelerated our first party ingestion, which is, you know, working with existing data that an institution might have, whether it's from their, you know, their own data, or it's aggregated by themselves or by another aggregator, and actually being able to ingest. So we did a lot of work on our ingestion team to make sure we could ingest different formats of data and still put them through our enrichment engines. And so those are kind of the three things that we all thought we wanted to do, but we just actually said now is the right time. So there was kind of a bit of a roadmap, sort of shuffle, if you will.
Sure. Right. Cool. Yeah, that one of the early points you made there really struck a chord with me about the fact that the consumer's data is going to be changing, and maybe the story that the past data is telling you isn't really the consumer that you're dealing with moving forward, because of the impact of the pandemic. So really good point that is. We've also got a question for you around customer trust. Customer trust is a really interesting point. Do you think customers are now trusting open banking, or do you think there's still more work to be done here?
Yeah, I think that the work is ongoing, right? So, you know, the first, you know, we've been working on these flows since 2015 and back all the way going back to screen scraping and things like that. And you know, when we did the screen scraping flows, which was kind of hosting the bank's login and doing that whole piece, was a lot of customer drop off, right? And because customers really didn't understand what they were doing, they didn't, you know, they hadn't seen anything like this before. They were on a mobile app, but they were putting in their web password rather than their mobile password. And so like that was, you know, if we look at where we were then, there was about a 50% drop off on that. Take it to today, you know, you've got app to app connectivity, you know, we've got really, you know, developed guidelines and flows that help customers understand what they're doing. And that's, so the drop off there is really decreasing. You know, the speed of it is better. And the reason why I mention that is because, you know, trust is inevitably difficult if it's not easy. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't feel secure. There's something about a seamless flow that's, you know, going into your bank app that feels much more secure. So that's really increasing. You know, and then the third piece of, you know, trust is, look, have I done it before? Has it worked? And so now, you know, like I say, we hit that 2 million point this year. all of our projections are certainly will far surpass that in the next couple of years. So more and more customers are now, I've done that before, or a friend's done that before, and as once you've done it once or twice, you become very comfortable with it. So those kind of barriers are really coming down.
On a related point, and as the final question, because we're pretty much out of time now, there was an article noticed in the press yesterday where the head of open banking at NatWest was asked if when open banking would have succeeded, and he said when we stopped talking about it. So any agree or disagree? Thoughts on that to close us out?
Look, I kind of think, a couple of days ago, Google announced that they were using open banking in a consumer app, and they had some flows and ways of sort of talking to the customer about the data, which was a little bit different, which was quite interesting. We weren't surprised by that announcement in any way, as you can imagine. The job is certainly in our minds never done. I think we've getting open banking to be a sort of game changer in terms of the value add is really like a hump we're now starting to get over in terms of actually creating insight that wasn't there before. So when we set out on this journey, I think we were a little bit younger. We probably thought the journey wouldn't be quite as long, but sat here today, I mean, we certainly think this is a long-term change. This is an industry-wide shift, and it's not just going to affect banking in terms of sort of this open data thing. So I think we're still actually very much at the beginning. I think I was asked earlier on in the year, how would you describe open banking today? And again, I'd say sort of really in its infancy. So yeah, I think I'd echo that. That we're really at the beginning of this thing, and the impact will be kind of very wide-ranging in terms of just the principle that someone can extract their data from a service they use and use it elsewhere. I think that's a really exciting principle.
Yeah, agreed. Well, look, thanks again for your time today, and on the pre-record as well. Hope everyone's enjoyed listening, and just want to wish you all the best with everything with Bud, Ed.
Take care. Thank you so much for having me, and I really appreciate everyone taking the time to sort of listen in.